Hey guys, this is Arthur, and you are watching How to Draw Creepy Creatures. Now today, I actually got a request from one of my very nice loyal followers, Bigley Wombat, to do the Grim Reaper. Now, I'm sure most of you know what that is. Of course, anybody who grew up watching Billy and Mandy would know what that. God, I love that show, and I'm way too old to love that show. Okay, so anyway, the Grim Reaper is a preternatural entity that is in charge of bringing the souls of the dead to the next life, whether that be heaven, hell, limbo, purgatory, whatever the specific belief system is. Now, that type of being is known as a psychopomp. Now, the Grim Reaper has a number of different names, from Baron Samedi in Haitian culture to Anku in uh, Celtic mythology. Now let's get into it. All right, all right. That was Uktena. Okay, so we're going to start with a very simple shape. We're going to start with the top of the head. Now this is easy because the Grim Reaper is basically humanoid, so you're just going to start drawing your normal basic humanoid skeleton. What I really like about the Grim Reaper, and I think it's very interesting, is that even though it's this dark, scary, ominous looking being, it's not necessarily evil. Like, it's not like demonic or something like that. It's more like an angel of death. The thing is that the symbolism here is important because the Grim Reaper is the personification of death. And the reason why it's not really evil is that death itself isn't evil. I mean, most cultures, of course, believe that death inflicted upon another person is evil, like murder, but just death in general is it's just a part of life. It's life itself can't exist without death. Nothing can be created without something else being destroyed. And that's why the Grim Reaper is usually viewed as something scary, but not necessarily something evil, because its its existence is why life can function on Earth, which I think is a very interesting philosophical way of looking at it. And it kind of takes the fear out of death too, like this is just a natural process. Okay. All right. Right. All right. See how we just sort of drew like the outline of a skull a little bit? That's what we're going to start out with. Also, usually the Grim Reaper is portrayed as having legs, of course, but I'm actually going to omit that detail. Instead, I'm going to have tattered rags hovering above the ground. I think it would just be so unsettling if it's not actually walking, if it's just floating, like it doesn't even need legs. So we're going to skip that. Also, the Grim Reaper is sometimes portrayed as having wings, but not all portrayals have that. And I really like, if you remember the Grim Reaper statue from Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire from the graveyard scene, this absolutely beautiful Dark Angel interpretation of the Grim Reaper where it has wings. I like that, but I'm thinking that we could go for a compromise where it sort of has wings. So we're just going to draw the outline here. But it's almost like it's part of its robe. Yeah, you see that? You'll kind of see where I'm going with this a little bit later. Also, mm-hmm. I'm going to give it a very old-fashioned sort of scythe. In fact, I'm actually going to choose to put the scythe in the left hand because the left hand is often associated with the other world. Things like witches and stuff like that are supposed to be left-handed, so I think for this kind of dark divine being, it should be left-handed. It's kind of an interesting touch. You could put it in whatever hand you like, but that's what I'm going to do with it. Okay, so just kind of draw some superficial ribs and a sternum. Doesn't have to be perfect for now, so. Now, if you remember how we were drawing creatures with flesh on them, we usually do like a cylinder like this, kind of thick to represent muscle. But we're not going to do that here. I just drew that as an example because it's supposed to be all bones. So instead, we're just going to draw where we think the bone should be. Yeah, in fact, I'm already kind of familiar with how to do this because I read a series of novels called Rapunculus where one of the characters is a Grim Reaper type figure. So when I'm doing the illustrations, it kind of just looks like a skeleton with a tattered robe around it. So mine's very different, but it's has some similarities here, so it's kind of familiar for me. Okay. All right. Gonna draw like the impression of the hood a little bit. Okay. So this is what you should have so far. Really, there's no set description of what the Grim Reaper is supposed to look like, so some prefer to make it female. So if you want to add things like hair and stuff like that to kind of distinguish it as female, that's great. But we're just going to go for, in this lesson, we're just going to go for kind of the androgynous looking Grim Reaper, where it could be male or female, depending on your interpretation. Drawing the Grim Reaper is fun too, because it's kind of like it's a refresher in human anatomy, especially with the bones. Yeah, that's fun. So. Okay. Okay. In fact, I've actually made the arms a little bit longer than what you would see on a real human being, like a real human skeleton. I thought that that would look kind of unsettling if the arms were like thin, stretched out, almost had this bird-like quality, just to sort of separate, like, this is not a human ghost. This is not a real human skeleton. This is something else. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Kind of draw these clavicle bones here. Okay. Now kind of count the amount of ribs here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's supposed to have 8 ribs. That's what occurs on a human being. So, interestingly, it was actually a very commonly held belief by most people who weren't in the medical profession up until the mid 20th century that men only had 7 ribs and women had 8, and that originated from the passage in the Bible where Adam breaks off his rib to create Eve, and so that even persisted in more secular culture, just that general belief, until it was eventually disproven. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Yeah. I'm not sure how anatomically correct my interpretation of a human rib cage is, even though I've drawn it a couple times, but since this is supposed to be a fantasy drawing, I think that we can, there's a certain suspension of disbelief, so if it's not perfect, don't worry, it's just for fun. Alright. Okay. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, there we go. Always remember to double check your work so that you get the right amount of ribs in there. I mean, the the observer, like the person looking at the picture, probably isn't going to bother to count the ribs, so they won't notice if you made a mistake. But sometimes I've done that, and even though nobody notices, I notice, and it's just like, oh, why did I do that? So avoid being bothered by it and just double check your work. You'll thank me later. Okay. Okay. Okay, there we go. Now remember that, I forget what these bones are called, but they're the little prongy bones that come out of your spine on the sides. Okay. Yeah. See what the benefit of stretching the arms out and making the hands a little bit bigger than normal does? It makes it look much more unsettling. It's a good effect. If I do say so myself. Okay. Now remember that the sternum is kind of butterfly shaped a little bit. Oh, not sternum, I should say pelvic bone, sorry. Okay. 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 Now, alright, this is what we got so far as for the skeletal structure. Now let's work on the face a little bit. Okay. Or the lack of a face, I guess I should say, since it's just a skull. Now, if you remember when we were doing the Wendigo on how to do this deer skull, it's the very same basic principle. It's just the human skull is just a little bit shorter. It's more squat. Now, when some people do the Grim Reaper, they like to do like scary eyes like that or something like that. I don't like to do that because I don't imagine the Grim Reaper is creepy, obviously, but I don't imagine it as an evil entity. I just imagine it as death. It just is. Okay. Okay. Alright, now I got the skeletal structure. Yeah, you see that? Alright, now let's work on the scythe a little bit. Now, some people like to do like a perfectly straight scythe. I like to do a more old-fashioned variety that you would see by farmers during the Renaissance period. Yeah, because from that time period you have some absolutely haunting paintings of the Grim Reaper that came out. Okay, so, alright, usually had a handle about here. so that you could have extra grip. Okay. We're going to make the edge just a little bit rusty or ragged. Okay. Yeah, that's good so far. Alright, now let's work on the clothes. Now, I don't imagine the clothes as looking like literal fabric. I imagine it as like, oh, sorry about the camera there. I imagine it as like this fabric that's morphing into fog or shadow. So we're going to make it like pale, well, not pale, but like translucent, foggy. Remember to show the outlines of the skeleton underneath it. Yeah, I kind of want to do feathers to these wings, but feathers that are turning into tatters. Like, you can't really tell whether or not it just looks like feathers or not. Okay. Right. I'm going to distinguish it a little bit more around the hood. Okay. Now kind of do very pale sort of marks with your pencil to indicate that it's like foggy, it's vaporous. Okay. Yeah, I feel like there should be something down here a little bit. Like yeah, kind of like a tail like you would see on a like a comet or something, except like made out of this black mist or gray mist. Okay. Let's darken these areas just a little bit. Like, you know what? I was gonna avoid drawing over the scythe, but I think it'd be cool if, like, to show that the scythe is kind of going through him a little bit. Alright. Now... Alright, now we're just gonna kind of pretend that we're shading this area in order to do the fogginess of it, so we're just gonna do it like this. Remember, smooth, steady circles when you're shading. That's basically what we're doing here. We're just shading this. In fact, I'm gonna have this draping over his shoulders a little bit to show that it's transparent. It kind of looks like I'm doing zigzags, but not circles, but I am doing circles, so just very tight. That's what you want to do. Remember to get in between all the bones, or the ribs I should say to be more specific. Remember to shade around the blade of the scythe in order to suggest that the scythe is actually poking through this tail area. That's a good way of affirming to the viewer that it's supposed to be vaporous. Okay. Okay. Now, in order to kind of distinguish these areas that's not in the vapor but popping out, we're just going to add a little bit more black to them with the very, very sharp side of the pencil lead. And this will be easier because from all that shading that we did, the pencil lead has been worn down and is very sharp. So now is a good time to do that. Okay. Very carefully do all these finger bones, the phalanges. I only know how to save phalanges from watching the TV show Bones. Okay. Really, I think I learned more about human skeletal anatomy from that stupid procedural crime drama than actual high school anatomy. Okay. Okay. Kind of define these bones a little bit because a lot of it lost detail during the shading. So let's make this pop a little bit more. Especially make his eyes pop, well, his sockets, because that will be kind of the focal point of the face. You don't have to pay too much attention to darkening the ribs. Just darken like maybe one side of each rib so that they're more noticeable. Okay. Maybe add a little bit of shading to the handle of the scythe. Alright, and you have just learned how to draw the Grim Reaper. Let me move the camera a little bit so that you can see that. Yeah. Okay, there we go. Okay, like, share, and subscribe. And in fact, Bigley Wombat, who requested this creature, asked me to, well, he asked me what type of pencils I like to use, which is a good question. I told him that for anybody else interested, I told him that I like to use just plain old generic brands like maybe Bic mechanical pencil, but I also like to use, excuse me a second. Oh yeah, Pigma Sensei, which is what you can see here. And it's 0.7, so. Okay, so I am totally open to more requests. I think it'd be a cool idea since Halloween is coming up if some of you guys could suggest your favorite Halloween creature, like or De los Muertos creature. It's my favorite time of the year, by the way. And anybody who finished a lesson from this show and they want to show it off, you can send me your artwork at arthurwrotethis@gmail.com, and as long as you give me your written permission, I will display it on the show with your name so that everybody can see that you did it. Okay, thanks for watching, and goodbye.